Okay, good afternoon, and welcome to our virtual design review panel meeting. On our agenda this afternoon, we have a development proposal for 1570 Main Street West in Hamilton. I am Edward Winter, urban designer at the City of Hamilton, and hosting this meeting. We have Jennifer Mallard from our design review panel who will chair the meeting. In addition to our panel, we have the applicant team, city staff, members of the public, and media observing today. Members of the public are welcome here, but there's no questioning or comments from the public at this meeting. The meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded to the City of Hamilton's Design Review Panel webpage. And lastly, a reminder to our panelists to keep the microphones muted when you're not speaking. Thank you, everyone, for attending our Design Review Panel. And Jennifer, you may begin when you're ready.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Edward, can you please confirm that this session is being recorded?
Yes, I confirm.
And are there any changes to the agenda today?
No, we don't have any changes.
Are there any declarations of interest from the panel members? I'll take silence as a no. Okay. On the agenda today is the review of 1570 Main Street West. The lead planner on the file is Elena Baldessera, who's available to answer any policy questions. An urban designer for the City of Hamilton, Edward Winter, will make a brief presentation. Good afternoon, Edward. We're ready for your presentation, and please keep the presentation to under 5 minutes.
Great. So here we see an air photo, and the subject lands are in the middle along the north side of Main Street. We see Main Street running east and west. North of the subject lands is an established neighborhood with low density, primarily single detached housing. Along Main Street West itself, there is a commercial corridor. And you can see to the west and south, there's a little bit of a change to industrial, and an institutional school to the south as well. And then, of course, further to the east, we have McMaster Campus along Coots Drive and Main Street. So this proposal is for a 12-story residential building at 1570 Main Street West. This would have 176 rental units, including 2 levels of underground parking with 74 residential parking spaces. Approximately 115 square meters of dedicated retail space is proposed and to be provided on the ground floor, fronting Main Street. So we have some site photos of the site. Existing is we have this church. Is looking on looking north on Main Street, and then the lower picture is looking from the corner of the site in a southwest direction across Main Street, and noting the commercial along Main Street. The top picture, we again see the subject property on the right and looking down Main Street, and the lower picture looking east along Main Street. And then this is Kingsmount Street. This is the north-south residential local street on the east side of the subject site. Finally, we have the western side local street, also showing. We can just see the side of was previously a gas station. Okay, here we have the conceptual site plan showing Main Street along the bottom. We have a few residential entrances on the western portion, and the primary residential and residential, or pardon me, commercial space on the right. Vehicular movements are through the north of the site and proceed from Kingsmount to Cottrell Street. Pardon me. So there were some staff comments from the formal consultation. which was held May 2nd of this year. The transportation planning identified a 5-meter road widening along Main Street West. And so we were looking for the applicant to illustrate that on their site plan and show how their concept plan works with that constraint. So we saw the site contained Binkley United Church, which is a church building from 1953, and it was included on the city's inventory of heritage properties. The proposal is to demolish the existing building. A cultural heritage impact study would demonstrate how the heritage attributes of the property could be conserved through either mitigative measures or alternative development approaches. So I'm sure we'll hear some about that. In terms of massing, staff had some concerns about the proposed setbacks and step backs and a lack of podium along Main Street. So staff's concerns were that there wouldn't be effective wind and light sun shadow performance on the site. And so we were looking for additional information in development of the proposal. So questions for discussion today, we had 4. The first was, how well does the proposal massing respond to the existing pattern of the community? How well does the proposal work to transition to the lower scale existing residential to the north? And how well does the proposed development mitigate negative impacts from sun and wind? Second, does the site layout and building composition fit within the neighborhood character along Main Street West and build upon the desirable established patterns in terms of built form, height, density, and landscaping? Third, how well does the site layout support pedestrian environment along Main Street West? How do the residential units respond to this condition? And does the setback from the street provide suitable landscaping and transitioning from public to private spaces? And lastly, how well does the proposed development integrate sustainable design features within the overall design of the building and site works? That concludes the staff presentation.
Thank you, Edward. We're now ready for the consultant to provide additional information. Please keep your presentation to 10 minutes.
Okay. Can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Seeing nods. Okay. So my name is Alistair Grierson. I'm an architect and associate at KPMB, and I'll be presenting on behalf of the owner, our client, Kindred Works, for the development at 1570 Main Street West. So there are 4 parts to this presentation. I'll go through the first 3 and then leave the floor plans and elevations to the question period after. So we got a great overview of the Ainslie Woods neighborhood. I'm just going to quickly reiterate that our subject site is on Main Street between Kingsmount and Cottrill. It is a mixed-use neighborhood. There's a variety of low-rise residential. We're within walking distance to McMaster University. St. Mary's Secondary School is to the south, and we are in the commercial corridor along Main Street. And so it's a great site, but there are challenges to it. One of them being the shallowness of the site, which we'll get to a bit later in the presentation. And so layering over, there's some green spaces to the north. There's a lot of bike and hiking trail networks. And there's a proposed extension of the B line as part of the blast network across Main Street. So it's really supporting the idea of densification along Main Street. So I'm going to quickly go through some of the planning slides. The urban structure has been identified as a secondary corridor in Schedule E of the official plan. And then we are designated as mixed use, medium density as well in the Hamilton official plan. This is supported again in the Ainslie Wood Westdale secondary plan, where we're again mixed use, medium density designation. And while the secondary plan does recommend a 3-story corridor height, there are a number of proposals in the area that suggest this is being in transition, and we've put together this diagrammatic plan showing the recent projects proposed along Main Street. At the top, we have our subject site and 7 other projects either along Main Street or in very close proximity to the subject site. So there are a number that have been approved between 9 and 15 stories, and then there are others that go even higher than that, though most of those are still in review. And this is a quick diagrammatic street elevation that we've put together to demonstrate that the proposal at the subject site is well within this new scale that's being proposed along Main Street. And if anything, we're sort of on the more modest side of some recent proposals. I'm going to skip quickly through these because we've seen some images of the subject site already and get into the architecture. So this is a aerial photo just a bit closer. We can see the subject site, that existing heritage church in blue. We are working with ATA architects for that heritage impact study. It's been found that it is not necessary to preserve this church. There are some architectural features that we're looking to inform the design, which I'll get into in the images. So now for the overall site strategy and looking at the site plan, we are a bit of a wedge-shaped site, and it is fairly shallow for a mid-rise type building. So we've positioned the deepest portion to be the residential lobby combined with a cafe, and that deeper part to the southeast, and have lots of streetscaping and public amenity at the ground floor in that area. To the west, we have our grade-related units, and then to the north is the back of house and ramp to access the underground parking. North of that, we have the laneway, and there is a landscape buffer between the laneway and the housing to the north. So in the roof plan, you can see how we've articulated the upper volumes. They're sort of stepping in threes, and then the stepping of the terrace below, the podium below, provides lots of opportunity for rooftop amenity spaces, green roofs, that we feel add a lot to the project. And I'll just speak for a little bit about the responses to the pre-application. So we have stepped back from Main Street to allow for that 5-meter road widening, which is actually, we've spoken with the city and we're able to negotiate that down to 4 just to try to mitigate the impacts to the neighborhoods, so we can locate the building as close to Main Street as possible. The previous scheme also had a 2-level podium that went all the way back to the neighbors to the north. So we've removed that and have stepped back 9 meters to the north face of the proposal. And in addition, in response to the podium comments, we've really revisited the podium of the building and stepping it in height, but also in plan to respond to the angled property line. So in doing so, we feel we've created a really dynamic streetscape, adding a lot of visual interest, as well as creating unique opportunities, as you can see, for rooftop terraces that can synergize with interior amenity spaces. That level 2 terrace we're imagining as a great place for a child or a kid's play area on the exterior, and then the main amenity space on the level 11 roof. So there's a number of images, so I'm going to go just quite quickly through, but we feel this is a very dynamic and handsome composition from Main Street. Looking to the west, you can really see how the podium steps out to the angled sight line. And then from the neighborhood, we're looking at the back of the building. Those houses are shown ghosted just to understand that the material of the podium wraps the full building and highlighting that landscape buffer. And another image from Kingsmount, we're looking at the entry to the underground parking. I'm going to come back to the elevations just so we have time to get through some of the shadows, acknowledging that, yes, we are impacting the neighborhood to the north. And this is speaking to that challenge with the shallow site. Even if we were to stay as of right at 3 stories, we would be impacting the neighbors. We feel that by moving close to Main Street, we are mitigating that a little bit. Also stepping the overall height of the building provides a little relief, and it's worth noting that the shadow moves fairly quickly. So the neighbors to the north and east will get light in the mornings, and then the neighbors to the west, starting at about 3 p.m., will get afternoon light.
Just one, we're 2 minutes left, Alistair, so if you can
Okay.
judge accordingly. Thanks.
Yes. So this is the existing Heritage Church. We are taking the red brick into the podium. There's the double split column tower that we're using to articulate the lobby massing. You can see this is entrance to the main lobby, that brick detailing, street furniture. These are the entries to the at-grade residential units, so providing a number of thresholds. There's street trees, a number of planters. The entries are raised up and even recessed to create a number of thresholds separating from the street. This behind the building showing that green buffer to the neighborhood. And very quickly, I'll go through the landscape plan. So there's this is the concept for it. So the red is all urban streetscape. The main points are the cafe patio and residential public amenity space to the south and east, and then that landscape buffer to the residential neighborhood. So this is the landscape concept plan, the buffer and trees in front of the residential areas, and then a blow up of the urban streetscape. So lots of street furniture, opportunity for an outdoor cafe bar, integrated benches with planters, and just a very quick lookbook of what the urban streetscape and patio. Oops. I had 2 more images and my computer's froze. Landscape buffer, and I'll finish at the plans.
Okay, thanks, Alistair. At this time, we provide an opportunity for each panel member to seek clarification on any points that may require explanation. Please hold comments until later. Questions only, please, and we'll start with Dana.
Thanks for your presentation. I don't have any questions at this time.
Ted?
Thanks for the presentation. Question, is this intended to be rental or condominium?
Rental.
Rental, okay. Not specifically for students, just general open. It's not.
Not specifically for students, but there is a big ratio of 1-bedroom units. Now, Carly, I don't know if you want to speak further to this question.
Yeah, hi. Can everyone hear me?
Mhm.
I had trouble with WebEx, so I just want to make sure. Yeah, so I'm Carly Forster, work for the developer Kindred Works. These units aren't geared towards students, but understanding there is a large population of students in the area. Obviously not going to say no, but it's not specifically designed or geared towards students at this time.
Okay, thank you. And I was reading in the salvage heritage report that there was an intent to reuse and correct me if I'm wrong, but to reuse aspects of the interior of the building, the stained glass, the glue lambs, the pews, etc. Was that the intent to just salvage those, or were they to be reused in this project? And if so, where is it that you're planning to do that?
I think we were mostly focused on the exteriors at this time. I know there are lots of really nice elements of that existing church. I don't know that we have confirmation if we're going to be reusing any of that or making reference to it in the interiors.
Okay, thank you. And then the potential road widening, do you have, is there a plan for that road widening? And if so, have you been able to show what that means for the front of the site?
So Edward John, planner for Landwise, just jumping in on the road widening. So we have had confirmation from the city. We have requested a reduction from the 5 meters to 4 meters, which is what you've seen on the plans circulated. So just to clarify that, so we are able to do both the underground and at grade reduced down to that 4 meters. And obviously programming as the plans have been shown, the options in front of you today.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Those were my questions.
Thanks, Ted. Joey, any questions?
Yes, yeah, I have a question. Thanks, Alistair, for your presentation, and thank you to Edward. Alistair, you spoke about referencing the existing church and bringing red brick into the podium. Did you intend that to be literal? Are you salvaging brick from the church and going to be reusing it in the podium, or is it more a commemorative reference?
A commemorative reference.
Okay.
I do like the idea of using that existing brick, but it's not something that we've committed to.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. I have more on that, but I'll save that. I'll save it for my comments. So thank you for clarifying.
Okay.
Thanks, Joey. Jen, any questions?
Thank you, and thank you, Ed and Alistair. One thing I wanted to ask about is, are there sustainable design features that you've considered at this time?
Yes. So this is a part of a portfolio, so I might speak in that sense. All of the Kindred projects of this scale are targeting to be mass timber, so that it's a renewable resource and has lower embodied carbon. So that's a big one. I don't want to say, well, I'll say the word passive house. We're not targeting passive house certification, but we've taken a course as a full team about passive house level detailing. So while we're not seeking certification, we have very aggressive and aspirational air tightness values, very good windows and all triple pane, very high levels of insulation. In this case particular, we are south facing, so there's a lot of benefits to having south facing windows in the winter. So those are some. There's others that we're currently exploring. We haven't quite committed to green roofs yet, but there's opportunity for planting on the terraces.
Excellent, thank you. My one other question was just a clarification. I may have missed it. Is there any intent to fence the northern boundary of the site where it's adjacent to the residences?
Not currently. No, it's just a landscape buffer.
Thank you. That's all my questions.
Thanks, Jen. I have one additional question, and I applaud your initiative for mass timber and the sustainability initiatives. Are you going to be relying on gas, or is there a notion to do geothermal here?
So the site is notionally feasible for geothermal. It's too early to say whether or not it's going to be real on this site. There is no gas on any Kindred project, including this one. That's the ambition. And while the geothermal is not set in stone yet, all of the mechanical systems are very efficient. We use heat pumps and the individual heat pumps for each unit.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. At this time, we'll move over to the session where the panel members are allowed to give feedback to your presentation. We will start with Dana.
Thank you for the presentation. Just before I get into my comments, I just want to say I thought that your submission package was great. You had great illustrations, great documentation, great visual communication, and it made a very pleasant review experience for myself. So thanks for putting such great effort into the submission package. I do want to commend you for an excellent proposal. I do think you've put a lot of thought into both the public and the private amenity space. I like the mix of residential and commercial, and with residential that does exit to the street at the base of the building. I find the base of the building a strong point along Main Street. I do think that along Kingsmount, you should remove the back of the house bike storage that addresses the street. I think this should be active frontage. If we can swap it with amenity space, even having amenity space that looks out to this public realm area, I think that would be a bit of an improvement. I understand that you have a lot of constraints. It's a tight site. But if you're having kind of this great outdoor amenity space along that edge, I think that it would be better complemented by something that's a little more active from a looking out perspective. I do appreciate the playground that you've provided on the podium space. I think this will be really beneficial to families, young families, students that are living in the building. And I do appreciate your commitment to some 2 and 3 bedroom units. I think you would strengthen your proposal slightly if you could tip the scale with a few more 2 and 3 bedroom units to kind of mirror what's in the growing up Toronto guidelines, to be more consistent, just to make sure that space is well used. I think that would be good. And third, I think the outdoor amenity on the rooftop is great. You do have some wind concerns that I think you should take into account as you move forward to detail design how to mitigate that, how that amenity space can be usable. Because you're not providing individual amenity spaces like through balconies, I think this space will be highly used, and you want to make sure that in the summer it can be used for seating. I do like the simplicity of the design of the building. My concern is whether it works with the scale of the building at 12 stories, but I will kind of leave that to the architects on our panel to comment on further. Lastly, as you're finalizing the floor plates or the floor plans for the underground parking, just ensure you have a safe path of travel between the bicycle storage and the elevator for people that are moving between this space, so that there's no conflicts between cars and people. Otherwise, again, thank you for the great package, for the great proposal, and for all the thought that you've put into this so far. That's everything from me.
Thanks, Dana.
Thank you.
Ted?
Okay, well, I'm going to echo Dana's comments on the package. It was really pleasurable to go through, and love to have more like that. It was really easy to understand and well presented. So thank you very much for that. I think there's some really great positive aspects of this proposal. I think the landscape is working extremely well around the building. An amenity to the east on the corner, the commercial unit on the corner, I think those are working really well. The townhouses around the south and the west work well as well. I do think, though, that the wind needs to be looked at and how you're going to address those so that those spaces are actually successful, particularly at the corner and near the entrance. And I do think that I appreciate the simplicity and clarity of the architecture in principle, that it's not, and also working towards passive house principles that are avoiding, thermal bridging conditions and challenges in the envelope that are going to challenge its performance from a sustainable perspective. Having said that, I do think that the podium is very successful. The materiality, the articulation of the facade, the depth that it achieves, the difference in scale, the stepping, and the change up in the rhythms, I think are very successful at grade. However, and while I appreciate the compositional efforts on the upper half and the slight stepping that's happened, the impression of the upper massing is wall-like, and it feels quite relentless on both sides. And there's this intent to create 3 towers or 3 vertical massings. And while we can see that intent, I don't think the reading really is a flat facade at the upper level that runs the length of the site. And so it's not successfully breaking down the scale. I think there's no, if you look at floor plates 6 to 11 and beyond, there's no articulation 3-dimensionally in those facades. And I think that could be achieved either through, bays, cantilevers, or a greater level of material articulation or change of materials on the exterior. I won't suggest how you do that. I think you're very capable, KPMB as a firm, to figure that out. I think the way it meets the sky is starting to become very interesting. I think that could be articulated further in the same way that there's a change in the rhythm and the structure of how the building meets grade. I think it could do something similar as it meets and dematerializes or elongates as it meets the sky as well. In this neighborhood, simplicity is reliant on the details to be successful, and I think the upper portion's not there. When you look at it, it's going to be a large slab building, and I think if that could be taken further, then this would really be a powerful and exceptional design solution. I would also comment that or add to Dana's comments that the eastern bike area, and maybe it means that the ramp has to shift slightly, or could become would be more successful as a commercial space, and maybe those bikes are taken and board closer to the actual lobby space of Arrival. Those are my comments. I look forward to seeing this project move forward. Thank you very much.
That's great. Are we allowed to respond, or is it listening?
At this point, it's just listening, but
Okay.
we do give you an opportunity at the end to respond to comments. So if you don't mind, we'll keep going, and then you can amass all your comments together.
Sure. Thank you.
Next up,
Yeah.
Joey.
Thanks, Jennifer. Well, since Ted just spoke about the architecture, I'll quickly speak about that, but most of my comments will focus on the heritage strategy. I think with any site that is not very large and where you're really trying to kind of fit a lot of units on a relatively small footprint, it gets very difficult. And I think potentially if you're trying to match a certain number of units there, and if there's an opportunity, you may want to consider going a little bit taller. And maybe going a little bit taller, getting all those units in there will allow you to articulate those facades a little bit better, at least give you some more options or a little bit more flexibility. And I'm suggesting that because in your comparison study, you were quite a bit shorter than not quite a bit, but you were shorter than a few of them, and quite a bit shorter than a couple of the projects. So it could be something to consider. The heritage impact assessment calls for a cultural heritage documentation report, and also a salvage report, which I think are both important pieces to understand how the deconstruction and demolition of the church building will happen. I understand that through ATA's HIA that they had determined that the church does not have heritage value, although it did meet 3 of the criteria. I'm not going to disagree with their recommendations and with their evaluation. I also think it's very difficult to place heritage value on mid-century modern buildings when relating to more historic ones. And this building has a number of attributes, but it is definitely a modest mid-century modern church. With that said, if it doesn't have heritage value, also always very difficult to adapt a church typology for multi-unit residential. So if this church does not have heritage value, then what type of value does it have? I believe it has environmental value and also, as Jen brought up, sustainable value. So salvaging and reuse is absolutely a sustainable strategy and one that should be considered for this project. The HIA talks about sympathetic design, that the proposed development's design should be sympathetic to the church by incorporating salvaged materials to enhance compatibility and create features that reference the church. Using materials and details that relate will further connect the new development to the site's cultural heritage. I think from the design that we have seen to this point, the current design is not really doing that. I think that's fine. I think that's very difficult to do. But what I would like to see as this project develops and the document and salvage report is submitted, that this building is deconstructed as much as it can be. And if the materials cannot be used on the site, that the materials be used elsewhere and that they are stored and considered for other projects, either within Hamilton or around the greater area. I think this is an idea that is not a policy yet, but we're definitely moving towards that. And I think this would be a great project to showcase how to do that. Those are my comments. I agree with my colleagues. Very good and comprehensive package. And also, I think a very good project that I'm interested to see how it develops. So thank you.
Thanks, Joey. Jen?
Thanks, Jennifer. So I have to agree with the comments that have come before, and I wanted to highlight a couple of things that I really appreciated in your package. One of them being the kid play focused amenity area, the landscape design. You've really put a lot of thought and effort into it, and it shows. I think the integrated seating and planters work well. The patio space at the corner cafe makes a lot of sense, along with the outdoor cafe bar seating that you've included. I think those are all really nice touches. I'm happy to see some bike parking, though most of this falls within the public right of way and may need to be relocated if or when that road widening occurs. I do see those as all really good features of this design. I also think the townhomes along Main Street and wrapping around the side of the building are good active use. But I do think there's a little bit of a missed opportunity there to make them more than one story and more than one bedroom. I think we could have contributed through this project a little bit more to the kind of that missing middle housing that we're always looking for. So having a couple more bedroom units in there, if possible, would be something I'd encourage you to explore. I agree with Dana and Ted about having more active frontage on Kingsmount. I think having the retail wrap around through this section would be beneficial to the project and helping to activate that side. I do think you'd need more wind mitigation through this area, and potentially stepping back the building on that frontage could help to break up some of the wind that's coming down such a tall building face. So I'd encourage you to kind of take a look at that and see if there's something you can do there to enhance that side. Overall, I do find the height to be justifiable, especially with the area redeveloping over time. But I think the massing needs a little bit more work, particularly in how it is impacting the residences to the north, particularly with overlook and shadowing. I think buffering of these sites would help. I think while it's nice that you've dedicated a landscape strip, it's fairly narrow. I do like to see trees there. You might want to consider evergreens and maybe a fence to really create a stronger buffer at that ground level. And more work needs to be done to make sure that the overlook that's happening from upper stories is not as significant an impact on this kind of residential community to the north. I have a little bit of a safety concern with the back alley that you've kind of created with that lane through there. It may be something that you need to consider surveillance for. Time will tell more than anything, but I would discourage lighting because, again, of the impacts that would happen to the north residences. Overall, I really appreciate the level of thought and detail that's gone into this project. I think a couple others have mentioned how nice this package was. So it was a very pleasing one to read through. So thank you for that. And I'm also looking forward to seeing this development come forward and come to fruition. So thank you. Those are all my comments.
Thanks, Jen. I have a few comments in summary, and then we'll give you an opportunity to respond. Just quickly echoing my colleagues' great package. Thank you for its clarity. I also congratulations on your commitment to sustainable initiatives. The mass timber was great to hear, and the fact that you don't have any gas-fired equipment is also a great news story. I echo Ted's comments that the podium is really nicely done. I think you've got some varying brick textures there that are interesting for people at the ground plane. So you've thought about people at the ground plane, but it's also a nice echo to, classically modern 1960s brick buildings where, there was a lot more creativity then in what you could do with brick. So there is an echo there that I completely appreciate. I think I echo Ted's comment too, that the podium is successful, but the upper portion of it needs a bit more attention in terms of just a subtle variation in the plane so that it doesn't appear as a white wall, both on Main Street and for the houses on the other side. But I do appreciate the project's simplicity. It'll be elegant and really refreshing. So thank you for that. Dana's comment on the ground-related units that could become more bedrooms, could become units with more bedrooms. I think that's a great idea. You've got, 9% of the units as 3-bedroom. And we talked about the kids' play area, so there won't be that many kids there, but if you could increase the number of families living there, that would be a good news story as well. Those are all my comments for now. So Alistair, I see you taking notes there. Do you have any feedback for the panel?
Yes, just thank you for all of the thoughtful comments, especially the articulation of the uppers. That is something that our team has been working hard on. Unfortunately, one of the drawbacks of mass timber is it's very hard to push and pull mass even a little bit. So we're trying to work with materials. So it's very subtle, and I think we can up that, but we are working with fiber cement panels, and you can get different finishes, and that's what we're trying to suggest here. I think we can exaggerate that more. I think there's also options changing the fenestration of each of the 3 masses to try to, again, get away from it being a monolithic wall. That's something that we're actively working through.
It's great to hear.
The overlook and some of the shadowing impact will be a bit more challenging. Again, with mass timber, there's a very specific building width that we need to hit to make it work, and it takes up most of the width of the site. So it is difficult to even shave off little bits. It ends up ruining the efficiency of the structure. So that is a bit more of a challenge.
Are there any further comments from other team members?
Just Edward John from Landwise. I just want to thank everybody for the comments. Obviously, the next part of this process is to meaningfully address those, and we look forward to the next steps. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. This meeting is now adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.